Okay, so can we do it more organizational, like a list, like go through how many different, like if this was a science experiment, how many different elements within, say, the workout that everyone is already doing, what are different things that they can adjust to get a different stimulus?
I think the like kind of shotgun approach, or like the big broad approach, could be you're just completely changing kind of the goal of the program. It's like you're doing a bodybuilding type of program. You're doing a body part each day. You're doing legs one day, chest one day, back one day, and you're just doing kind of high volumes on those days. Great. And now you go, okay, I'm going to completely switch it up, and I'm going to go full body every single day. So that's going to give you a different stimulus, because you just went from one body part each day to now you're doing full body each day. Another could be you're going to go to like a HIIT type of training, like an interval type of training.
Well, can we pause on that? Can we not go into the styles of training more, like, say if I'm going to continue to do more of a body part split, or I'm doing a 1 day lower body, 1 day upper body, going through like the tempo changes or pause reps or those kinds of elements.
I think yes.
Sorry, maybe you were going.
I'm trying to break it up of like, the first thing you could do is just completely change that. It's like, I'm not doing body part split anymore. I'm going to do full body. And you're keeping you're keeping the tempo the same. You're keeping the, like maybe volume the same, even if you're able to kind of figure that part out. Exercises, you're maybe keeping the same. You're doing everything the same, but you just went from body part split to now full body. So I'm more so just changing the workout as a whole, and not so much the interchangeable parts. So it's like, you could do that. You could go to like a HIIT type of training. You could go to the interval type training, which we can dive into those, of what those mean too. And even for runners, it's like some people they're training to run as far as they can and for as long as they can. You could completely change it to like starting to do sprints, and then same thing, like interval training type thing. I'm going to sprint for 30 seconds, and then I'm going to walk for 30. I'm going to sprint for 30 or walk for 30. So you could just change the whole mold in general. And then more so what you're talking about, of like going into, say you're doing a body part split, you really love it, you want to continue to do it, but you want to like get as much out of just that as you can. The things you can start to change is like your tempo of your exercises, which is like how, like what I was talking about with the bench press. How slowly am I coming down? Am I pausing at the bottom and then pushing back up? You could do it, I'm coming down fast and pushing back up, which is a little bit more of like a speed and power type of training. You're trying to get the bar off your chest, so you're trying to do that quickly. Typically then you'll load it with a lot more weight, because you'll be able to, that quicker pace allows you to push more weight for whatever reason. I don't know the specific sciences behind it, but I think it just has something to do. I wonder if it's a momentum thing. Yeah, I think it has something to do with momentum and whatever. But you could go to that. You could go to, typically we all kind of find our natural normal pace that we like. And it's just basically splitting that up or breaking that up.
That's where like I like to talk about the nitty gritty of those types of things, because I think they make such a difference. You don't realize, well, I didn't realize how much the same I was lifting. Like all my programs would change, but my tempo would stay the exact same. I am a trudge through it type of lifter.
Yeah.
That now you're telling me like in the squat, go down and come back up.
Yeah.
It's like, it is a different movement. Now my form is funky. Now I don't know how to push the weight in the same way. My muscle endurance is trash. I didn't know that it was trash. Like I could not keep up with that speed. It's like, well, I've been adjusting all these different elements, but I could have been keeping the same program and just adjusting the tempo, and it is a whole new game.
Yeah, you could definitely keep the same program and just change the pace at which you're doing the exercises and lifting.
So I guess I wanted to just clarify, because maybe that seems like, well, what's that going to do?
Oh yeah,
it's
a lot.
Wild.
And I think it's important to start with a very like normal, neutral pace, because I think when people are starting to get into it, they want to learn how to do it safely and whatever, and you should do that. But then as you get comfortable and you know how to do the exercises, you know what to activate and that sort of thing, you can then start to play with that tempo a little bit of, okay, let's make it a little bit quicker, like the explosive kind of work. This is what a bunch of athletes do. This is what football players do. They're constantly training explosive type speed or explosive type training so that they have more speed and they have more quickness and more power and stuff, because so much of the game is about those things. So you can start to do that, and then your body's going to change from that and form to that. It's like why marathon runners are thin, skinny, and not much muscle or fat to them, and why sprinters tend to have this, like, it seems a little bit different nowadays. It seems like they're a little bit longer still, but they're muscular and lean, and you can see they have muscle, to where the marathon runners, you just don't see that. It's like, well, that's based on the type of training that they're doing. It's not that their body just was all of a sudden born to do that. They've trained, and that's how their body is formed. That's why a lot of the sprinters all look the same. Marathon runners look the same. Running backs look the same. Quarterbacks look the same. Like, they're doing the same types of training, so their body's forming to that. So the tempo, you could also slow everything down. Like, and a lot of people will do seconds, 3 seconds down, 1 second pause, and then try to do 2 seconds up type of thing. You could do that sort of thing. I typically don't count. I just have been doing it for a while, where I know what's slow for me and what's fast for me. But the tempo, yeah, that's a big one. I mean, even like I was saying before, of just trying this new type of tempo of stretching even more in that bottom position and then holding that for a second and then pushing up. My bench press isn't impressive. I'm grabbing 35 dumbbells and doing it 10 times, and that's challenging. The last 2 reps for me are hard to get going and hard to get up, but like, you're still getting a lot out of that, especially when it's a different type of stimulus and different type of training that you're not used to doing.
Could you go through like pause reps?
Just pausing at the bottom or pausing in the positions?
Like, any of them, like explaining how many different varieties that you could use that, what the point of it is.
Yeah, the way that I'm using it now for the pause rep is so that I can get a little bit more ability, but there's also some studies that show that it could be a little bit more beneficial for hypertrophy. So it's like you could be getting a little bit bigger muscle for doing that, of having that pause, like really stretching down and pausing and then going and pushing back up. But the pausing, I mean, you'll pause in the position that is difficult, I guess you could say, or like the in-between part of the rep. So like with bench press, you're not going to pause at the top. You're already flexed out. You've already like completed the rep. Where you would pause is in between, is down low before you have to do the second part of the lift. So for every lift, there's a concentric phase, an isometric phase, and a eccentric phase. So the eccentric is like with chest press, where it's coming down and you're loading everything in. And then the isometric is that hold position, that pause you're talking about. And then the concentric part of the lift is when you push it back up. And these tend to change too, depending on the exercise. Just the eccentric and concentric part sometimes flips. But most of the time, it's the eccentric part is the come down. You're squatting down and coming down. An example where it's kind of different is the, I think, deadlift. You're starting at a concentric part of it, and then you're starting at an eccentric part of it, and then your concentric pull up, and then your eccentric is like on the way down is the second part of the lift. But that pause, from what I've done or what I know, there's not a whole bunch of variety with that, really. It's just pausing, holding for a second or 2 seconds. You could do like what we have at the studio of training the kids. Like, they're not really strong enough to do push-ups, so we do push-up holds. So we'll get into the push-up position and just have them hold there for 5 seconds or something, and then the idea is to grow from that. But it's like, if they can't do a push-up, people do this with pull-ups a lot of the time too. You can't do a pull-up. What you could do to train that is the isometric holds. Get up in that position, like a pull-up position, hold as long as you can, and then slowly let down. And we do that with push-ups too. You could do that with bench press, or you could do that with any exercise. There's something beneficial to the pausing, that isometric part of the lift. You're starting to activate and gather more muscle fibers to help you lift, but there's a point of diminishing returns where you don't have the strength, or they start to fatigue, so then it gets out. But it's a good way to like get into that position. You know, say it's a bench press, you're in that position and then you're kind of squeezing but not pushing up. In that pause, you're starting to recruit more muscle fibers, so that can be a good way to teach you how to activate that area.
That's exactly what I was going to say, is why
exercises.
I like the pause reps for that reason. I think there's two ways to pause. Where is it a mobility thing? So say with chest press, if people struggle to get their elbows behind their back, like behind their center, if they can't have that stretch, they can't have the mobility in their shoulder, that's where I would maybe cue the sit there and let it stretch for a second. You're not gonna be able to lift as heavy. It's more of just having your body practice tiny bits of load in that stretched position and then be able to move out of it. But why I like it too, for the sticky parts, you had me do it with squats, because when I was at the bottom, I was like, everything's turned off. Like I'm not feeling any part of my muscle until I got to like 90, and then everything would fire back up again. It wasn't because my muscles weren't, like, they were obviously working because I was standing up, but the ability to know how to activate certain, am I using my quads more? Am I using what? Like, I had no control and mind muscle connection to that you would have me sit at the bottom and then think about flex everything.
Yeah. Activate.
How does that feel? How do you activate? How do you gain more muscle activation with that, or muscle fiber activation with that? So then when I start doing squats at a regular tempo, my body is kind of has that understanding, or we're developing the understanding, that I like pause reps too, for being able to slow it down a little bit. Say, like I said, with the pull-ups or your lat pull down at the bottom, take a second, now squeeze everything.
Yeah.
So then I know when I'm going through, if I'm not feeling that same thing that I felt in the pause, something isn't happening, or I'm not focusing on something, or I'm not activating something as much as I could.
Yeah. The idea a lot of the times is you're trying to recruit more muscle fibers to make the lift more efficient, make it more effective, be able to lift more weight. Because you'll see with a lot of people, if they haven't worked out a lot, they don't have the experience, or they haven't even really trained in that way. Something like squat or bench press, or a lot of exercises, like they'll completely neglect the isometric part. So like with bench press, they'll come down, they'll basically drop the bar on their chest and bounce it and then push it back up. Some of that is just, it might be they're lifting really heavy and you don't want to put a lot of load in the isometric phase. You want that momentum like we were talking about. But there's a lot of people that's just the way that they've learned how to lift and how to train. And that part is they don't have the muscle recruitment in the isometric phase. And that is actually making it harder for them, not harder, but that's hindering them from being able to lift more weight, because they don't have the muscle recruitment when it comes to that. So it's like,
those type of people that can do crazy numbers on bench press, but you ask them to do push-ups and they struggle because like they can't lower themselves to the ground. They like flop on the ground and then have to push up because there's nothing to bounce off of like they can.
They don't have the momentum, and so it's you're kind of missing something there if you're just kind of doing this bounce technique. Or with squats, you see it a lot with squats, especially with training kids. Like they just want to get out of it as quick as possible. So they'll just like kind of start to slow it down, and once they get to maybe 90, they'll just drop and then come back up out of it. Towards like, you're now not recruiting any muscle in that bottom position to do anything. And you'll see even a lot of people that don't have that type of pace. They'll just drop down into the squat and then they'll start to come back up. And it's like that transfer period. It really is the eccentric to concentric period. You're switching. They're trying to avoid that isometric phase at all costs because they don't have the muscle recruitment in that position.
Mm-hmm.
To where if you're able to practice and gain that, that's going to help your lifts, lifting more weight, being in more control, like all that kind of stuff moving forward. And especially when you go to try to do other types of training, the carryover in that will be good too, because it's going to, different types of training is going to force you to do that, and different exercises are going to force you to do that. So the more that you can practice that and do those things a little bit more correctly, the better. That's why I'm kind of doing it now, is for the mobility aspect of it and because of the hypertrophy part of it. I just like, it's that thing of, they talk about with bodybuilders too, like if you see higher level bodybuilders or even just like people that have been working out for a really long time, they go into the gym and they kind of don't look like they're doing that much. And it's because they've figured out how to make it the most efficient. They're not going in there, you know, pushing balls to the walls type of attitude. It's like, I'm going to grab the 35s and do bench press with them, but I'm going to make them extremely efficient. Like I'm making the weight heavy type of idea. Like I'm going to go down really slow. I'm going to pause at the bottom. I'm going to stretch even farther, and then I'm going to push up from there. And then as I'm pushing up, like I'm thinking about contracting my chest as much as I can. Like there's people that go in there and just do the exercises. And then there's people that go in there and are like, they are trying to maximize and get as much out of the exercise and make it as efficient as possible, feel it as much as possible. So I think that's kind of a big difference or thing that you can kind of tell with people is, are you going in there and feeling the exercises? Or are you going in there and getting through them quickly? Versus the people that go in there and it's like, I'm going to feel every single second of this exercise. Like every time I bring the bicep curl up, like I'm thinking of flexing as hard as I can or 90% and really like activating my bicep. And then as I'm lowering down, I'm going slow and I'm thinking about my bicep stretching out and like the tension that there is of I just want to drop the weight, but I'm not going to. I'm going to let it slowly go. I get to the bottom. I lengthen out even more, almost like hyperextend my elbows to get as much stretch as possible. I hold that for a second and then I bring it back up. It's like, that's the tempo we're talking about. Like that is a totally different stimulus than like, I'm going to grab my 20s and I'm just going to do this 1, 2, 3 and like pump it out. It's like,
and not that not that that's bad either. It's depending on what you're programming in.
But that's just more common. The uncommon thing is to like, let's really slow it down and lengthen everything out and then like really contract everything and feel it